Good morning. Welcome back to my nightmare. I thought today we could do some stories from my novel, Quaint City. What Quaint City actually is, if you'll forgive me for talking a little bit extra right now so I can explain it to you, is a collection of 3 novellas that take place in the same small town. They're all small town romance featuring queer people in like their mid 30s. So yes, I just thought maybe we could start with the first one, which was Seems a Bit Queer. You don't have to read them in order. They have same side characters, but they're not like super connected. But yeah, so I just thought we could do that. I thought that sounded fun. I just finished making a quiche. I have my hot coffee right here. And I thought we could do that thing where we pretend I'm sitting in my own kitchen and not my friend's kitchen. And I read you a story in a couple of episodes. I will make playlists for all of them. They'll have dedicated playlists. Also, I just want to let you know I'm going to skip over anything I deem too spicy. If you want like the spicy chapters, they're in the novel. I actually got through most of Carmilla without having to edit any of them. But I think Seems a Bit Queer might actually have a scene that I might have to skip. But for the most part, they're just sweet romance novels. These ones are about people. There aren't any vampires that you're aware of in these. Yeah, I just thought it would be fun. They're short. Okay, let's get started. Let's find out. There is some adult language. I'm just going to let you know, as with all of my videos, I curse a lot in my writing as well as in my real life. And let's see. I'm going to read you some of the back matter or the front matter, which is what we call like the dedication and stuff. And I'm going to read the acknowledgments because I think it is important to acknowledge the people who have helped me get to where I am today. And then we'll just get into it. It Seems a Bit Queer, just to sum it up for you, is about 2 roommates falling in love during the COVID lockdown. So this starts with the COVID lockdown. And the sad thing is one of them is already dating someone who's not very nice. So content warning for a really asshole character. But if it makes you feel better and you've already watched Carmilla, you know what happens to Kyle. So Carmilla 86. Carmilla 86. My story, not like any of the other ones. Anyway, let's get started. I'm just going to get into it. Seems a Bit Queer by Avery Morstan. I need to reformat this book. It's missing a lot of pages. Oh, but this is my proof copy. You can buy the whole story on Amazon. So if you like the first 2 chapters and you want to go support me and purchase this and read the whole thing before I get to it, please, by all means, go for it. Seems a Bit Queer by Avery Morstan. We are going to start with the dedication. This is the dedication for all 3 of the books included in this series. Individually, these ebooks were dedicated to my mother and my grandmother, Megan Gann and Bernadette, whose bangs I really did cut a hole in one afternoon. In addition to these beautiful humans who support me, this author would also like to acknowledge the beta reading and light editing services of the following individuals: Megan Gann, she, her; Jen Robinson, she, they; Allegra D'Ambruso, she, her; and the Prophet Loki Discord, they, them. So, a lot of people helped me to get these books published, and they are self-published, but that doesn't mean there wasn't a lot. It takes a village, guys. It takes a whole ass village. Chapter 1. Hold on. Chapter 1. There was a very slight crack next to the boob-shaped overhead light in Cameron's room. She didn't know why so many lights in rental apartments were shaped like tits, but the hairline crack that radiated away from hers reminded her of a vein pulsing outward. Cam would never have noticed the crack except for the fact that she'd been staring at her ceiling for the last half hour with her stomach in knots trying to eat itself. She knew why she was avoiding the kitchen, and she also knew that the same reason she was avoiding the kitchen was also the reason they probably didn't have anything to eat, even if she did go in. Fucking Kyle. Her stomach growled loudly. She rolled over to her side and scrunched the pillow under her head. The situation was getting dire then. Babe, you're out of cereal, said a loud, jarring, masculine voice. Cam cringed. The obnoxious voice that was practically screaming through her apartment didn't actually live here. Rather, he was romantically attached to her roommate Scarlett, and Scarlett didn't eat cereal. Cam purchased and devoured cereal. Actually, it was one of her favorite foods. She could eat whole boxes of chocolatey Rice Puffs or frosted processed corn in one sitting. But it had been hard to keep on hand since Kyle had started to stay with them during the pandemic. So what Kyle was really saying was that Cam was out of cereal. Cam puffed out a breath and her stomach growled again, this time louder. Babe, you're out of milk too, and peanut butter, Kyle called. Cam buried her face in the pillow and let out a groan of frustration. How could they be out of everything? Ew, what was that? Kyle said. And he was clearly speaking to himself in the other room, but the apartment had some thin walls. Cam gritted her teeth. From Scarlett's room, she could hear the gentle hum of a vintage sewing machine, and she knew that Scarlett probably couldn't hear Kyle's complaints over the noise of it. Or, if she could, she was choosing to ignore him, and who could blame her? Cam actually enjoyed the machine's gentle thumping noise. It was a really nice sound to fall asleep to, unless Scarlett broke a needle, because that was often followed by several loud curse words. Sewing had been something that Scarlett learned over the course of the pandemic, and she'd absolutely fallen in love with it. Kyle hadn't been living with them at first, and it had just been Cam and Scarlett trying to keep each other sane during the mounting terror and uncertainty. Cam had done the queer thing and started baking obscene amounts of banana bread, and Scarlett had done video chats with Kyle. And they'd bickered a little, probably just to break up the buzzing anxiousness and monotonous atmosphere. Finally, like every other household in America, they'd turned to learning hobbies. Cam had ordered a crochet hook and some rainbow yarn from a local shop in order to make herself a Pride-themed scarf for winter. Queen City had a few cutesy shops, and she wanted to keep the money local. Scarlett had been cruising an online yard sale group one day and found her vintage sewing machine, which was cheap but needed some oiling and cleaning because it had been in this guy's garage for a decade or two. The warm, golden afternoons that had seen Cam splayed across the foot of Scarlett's bed, hooking away, while Scarlett watched videos of how to get her darling Ruby, that's what she named her sewing machine, and it was precious, in proper working order, had been some of the happiest moments of Cam's life. "'Cause she's like my child," Scarlett had giggled, regarding the name of the machine. "So like Scarlett Jr., only she's precious too, like a jewel. My Ruby." Like most people of 2020, cloth masks had been one of Scarlett's first projects, and Cameron had a growing collection of them on her nightstand. There was one at the very top of the pile, which was a black cotton with ditzy little flowers all over it. That was her very favorite. It was the first one Scarlett had ever made. "So you can be safe," Scarlett had told her, with a smile that lit up her whole face. Scarlett didn't just smile. She beamed, like a beacon, pulling everything around her closer with her warmth. Without Kyle to interrupt her on the daily, Scarlett had managed to take her sewing business to a whole other level when she'd started her side business, Ruby Stitches. She made these incredibly flowy dresses in fun printed fabrics that she continued to source online as more and more people cleaned out their garages. The whimsical caftans, because that's sort of how they looked, only caftan but make it fashion, had provided her a nice outlet for her creativity to flow, and Cam took pictures of her modeling the garments on their fire escape or lounging in Scarlett's colorful room. Personally, Cam was a minimalist, and all of her furniture was clean lines and cubes from IKEA. But Scarlett had that vintage touch, and it made her all the more magical. Ruby Stitches was growing into a solid side hustle, and Cam was proud of Scarlett. Sadly, she was the only one. With restrictions loosening despite the virus continuing to rage, Kyle had become a permanent fixture in their apartment, and the first thing he complained about, other than their lack of food, was the time Scarlett spent on her sewing machine. Cam huffed. She heard Kyle's loud, thumping footsteps make their way back to Scarlett's room, and the humming of the machine stopped abruptly. There was a quiet murmuring, Scarlett's voice answering whatever he was saying, and then Kyle let out a whine. "Babe, I'm gonna starve. Let's go," he complained. Cameron couldn't quite make out Scarlett's reply, but Kyle's next remark had her jolt up in her bed. "You sew too much. It's not like this shit is ever gonna make real money. I don't even know why you try." "All right, asshat, that's it." Cameron growled to herself. Her feet hit the floor with a vengeful slap as she headed for the door. But just as her fingers curled around the knob, there was a gentle tap on the wooden panel from the other side. Cameron opened her door, and there was Scarlett. She'd been sewing, as evidenced by the stray threads clinging to her dress, and her red hair was pulled up into a messy bun on the top of her head with curls springing out in frizzy tendrils. "Hey, we're going to run to the grocery store and then probably grab some pizza. Can I get you anything?" Scarlett asked. Over her shoulder, Kyle had stomped into Scarlett's room and closed the door. Cam sighed, and Scarlett's face faded quickly from tired to embarrassed. "There may be a slight cereal shortage. I'll replace it, though." Cameron could feel the buzzing anger under her skin, but she didn't want Scarlett to think that it was directed at her, so she just blew out a weary sigh and shook her head. She hoped that her face looked casual despite the frustration. "I'm good. I'll schedule a no-contact pickup later for my stuff. Y'all have fun." If it had been anyone other than Scarlett, Cam would have had something nasty to say about boyfriends who steal too much food. But with those big doe eyes on her, she couldn't bring herself to complain. Especially since Scarlett knew that Cam and Kyle didn't get along well, and had tried to keep their interactions to a minimum. After all, what could Cam possibly say? As Cam's eyes fell, unable to hold Scarlett's gaze any longer, she let herself focus more closely on what Scarlett was wearing. It was loose, bright, printed dress with cartoon mermaids all over it and a large ruffled collar. The way the fabric brushed against Scarlett's rounded thighs and displayed the one large tattoo that Cameron knew about was delicious. Cam flushed and cleared her throat. "I love that. Is it new?" "Yeah, I made it yesterday," Scarlett said excitedly, giving a little twirl that had the fabric flaring out around her. Cam pressed her lips together and tried to look very excited and not just turned on. "That's amazing. You're so creative," Cam told her. She heard Kyle's condescending laugh, and she looked over Scarlett's shoulder at him. He was leaning in the doorway with his arms crossed over his chest. "Maybe half creative. She probably copied that from someone she saw on the gram," Kyle said with a mean smile. "I saw her searching clowncore yesterday." "Well, I love it. That collar is stunning," Cam said. She squeezed out to reach Scarlett's hand. She reached out to give Scarlett's hand a quick, reassuring squeeze. "I bet that took a lot of time to figure out." "Yeah, it did," Scarlett said slowly. Cam didn't like how the excited light had faded out from Scarlett's eyes, and she wondered what else Kyle had voiced an opinion on when Cam wasn't within earshot. "Look, babe, are you ready to go? I'm pretty hungry." Kyle pushed past them, wrapping an arm around Scarlett and dragging her away. Scarlett shot a glance over her shoulder at Cam, who tried not to interpret the emotion there as, "Please rescue me, he's secretly a serial killer," and called back, "I'll see you later, Cam." There's too many K's in this book. Cam watched them grab their mask and head outside. At least the apartment was safe now for a little while. Maybe it was past trauma from when she was younger, or she'd had some shitty roommates in her day, but when Kyle was around, Cam just didn't want to leave her room. She felt stifled, barricaded, unable to get out of bed, and listening to them bicker from behind the thin walls. His hypercritical jokes didn't make Cam feel safe in her own apartment. Maybe it was time to think about moving out, but that would mean leaving Scarlett on her own with that douchebag. Cam padded out to the kitchen to see if there was anything left from Kyle's reign of terror. There wasn't. She managed to make the world's most pathetic grilled cheese with 2 heels of bread and 1 American cheese single left in the place. And it was just going to have to hold her until she was able to get some real food. She padded back to her room, plate in hand, but she paused just outside of Scarlett's door. The sewing machine's front panel was open, and the bobbin casing was out, with the bobbin laying in a tangled heap. Prior to living here, Cam couldn't have told you what a bobbin was, but after the crash course in sewing machine maintenance that Scarlett had gone through, she knew it was important to how the machine had functioned. She couldn't imagine Scarlett leaving Ruby in such a state, but then again, Kyle had been particularly whiny today. Cameron frowned and left it. Not her machine, not her boyfriend, and definitely not her Scarlett. She closed her bedroom door and ate her nasty grilled cheese and spent the rest of the day in her room alone. The lovebirds returned eventually, and their noises were almost impossible to drown out. It seemed like everything was a production with the two of them. Cam understood love, and she definitely played that whole opposites attract game a few times in her life, but there were still limits. You needed to be somewhat on the same page about basic household functions if anything was going to get done, like bringing in groceries or sorting out food. It was an effort to drown out the chaos. Oh, sorry, that was in an effort to drown out the chaos. Cam tried to nap and then gave up and pulled up her laptop. Her favorite rom-com was available for streaming, she knew, and she was willing to doze along while it played. About halfway through, there was a light knock on her door, startling her a bit, and then Cam let herself into... And then Scarlett let herself into Cam's bedroom. "Can I come in?" she asked, giving Cam a hopeful smile. She held a plate in her hand with a few slices of pizza on it. "Brought you something to eat? I know you said you weren't really hungry earlier, but I just thought you might like some. It's from that stoner place up the street that you like." Cam paused the movie and sat up in her bed. Her hands reached up to scrub the bleariness out of her eyes because it looked an awful lot like an angel had just delivered pizza to her and the vision was too much to not be a dream. "Sure. Everything all right? Did Kyle go home?" She scooched so her back was up against the wall with her legs crisscrossed beneath her. She smiled as Scarlett handed her the pizza and slid up on the bed to join her. "Oh yeah, he's fine. He's in the living room playing that game he likes. I was trying to read, but him and his friends got so loud, even with the headphones on, that I can't sit there for very long," Scarlett told her. Cam shoved a piece of pizza in her mouth to avoid the disappointment that Kyle was still inhabiting their home. "And Ruby isn't working." "Your machine isn't working?" Cam asked, swallowing her pizza with a gulp. "It was fine earlier." Scarlett knitting her brows together like she was still trying to puzzle out how it was working perfectly one second and not working the next. I know, but the bobbin is skipping stitches and getting gnarled on the back of the fabric, so I can't finish that order I took for Gallery QC, at least not until I figure out what's happening with it." "Hey, I'm sure you'll figure it out. You got it in working order in the first place, didn't you?" Cam asked, nudging Scarlett with her elbow. Scarlett gave her a grateful smile. "Yeah, it's been a dream being able to start this business. I'd like to stop teaching one day and just do this, but in this economy..." Scarlett trailed off with a sigh. Cam looked down at her pizza, picking at the crust. "Scarlett, if anyone can do it, I know you can," Cam told her. "You're determined, and you've got a good business sense, and your social media has been on point." "Yeah, I know. It's just that Kyle..." "Fuck Kyle," Cam said before she could stop herself. Scarlett giggled. "I do." "That's so gross," Cam groaned, and she pretended to gag. Scarlett laughed. It was the first real sound of joy that Cam had heard out of her in a long time. "I thought I'd come see what you were up to. Maybe have a girls' night while he's exploring the wastelands or whatever is in his game," Scarlett said. "I'd really like that. We haven't had one of those in a long time," Cam said softly. She was painfully aware at how close Scarlett was sitting. Their legs were knocking together and their shoulders were just a hair away from touching. "Awesome!" Scarlett's focus turned to the laptop on Cam's bed. So what are we watching? Oh, I was watching that one about the defunct rock star who falls in love with Drew Barrymore. Because you know my thing about Drew Barrymore, Cam said, and she flashed sideways smile at Scarlett. Not to mention they're definitely a disaster queer couple. Can't convince me this is a hetero romance. Scarlett beamed in her sunshine smile back. Absolutely. 10 out of 10, 100%. The way that you find queerness in straight media has to be one of my favorite things about you. Well, it's not like we get a ton of representation. I've got to make do with what I've got, Cam said. She reached over and pressed play for a few minutes. They were quiet. Just Cameron, definitely not thinking about how fucking warm Scarlett was. Not Cameron, feeling like sweat was beginning to pool at the base of her spine. I just don't understand how it could have broken so easily, Scarlett finally mumbled under her breath. Cameron glanced over at her. I'm not sure either. Leaving it open like that couldn't have been good for it, Cameron said, picking at the worn spots in her jeans. Scarlett frowned with her brows knitting together. I didn't leave it open, she said. Sure you did. Your bedroom door was open when I came in and I saw your bobbin thing out and the door to the inside of the machine was open, Cameron told her. But Scarlett's face started to look like someone doing calculus. But when we came back, I guess I was in the kitchen for a while and Kyle was... Right conclusion reached then. Kyle had done something to sabotage the machine. Well, don't jump to conclusions. Maybe it's just an old machine and it's high maintenance, Cameron told her, pursing her lips. She hated saying it, but she knew if she said anything else, she was going to say something along the lines of fucking dump him. And that would probably cost her a friend. It had before. And life without Scarlett just sounded bleak. You're right. You're absolutely right, Scarlett said, but there was a hesitation in her tone. If it were possible, she seemed to shift closer and lay her head on Cameron's shoulder. You're a good friend, Cam. Good friends probably didn't think so much about the soft curve of their other friends' lips and what it might feel like against their own, especially straight friends with stupid boyfriends. But Cam still blushed at the compliment. Thanks. They stayed like that, pressed close on Cam's bed, occasionally roasting the mid-2000s fashion or the actors until the movie was over. That was about when Kyle burst in looking for Scarlett, just moments before the final payoff of a kiss between the two lovers. Cam wondered if there were other payoffs that Kyle missed too. There you are. Sorry, it was Kyle, not Scarlett. There you are. You completely disappeared on me, Kyle said, as if Scarlett had committed some horrible crime by leaving him in the living room. Oh, we just got caught up watching this movie. It's one of my favorites, Scarlett told him. Kyle looked at the screen, paused in that pivotal pre-kiss moment where the rock star had finally gotten the girl back after their stereotypical breakup. Ew, that stuff is lame. There's no plot. It's all eye candy, Kyle scoffed. Of course, he didn't like chick flicks. Cameron wanted to point out the hundreds of scantily clad women in the video games that Kyle was obsessed with, how they never seemed programmed to fight as strongly as their male counterparts, all of whom were fully clothed. What were they there for if not the eye appeal? But Scarlett was already scooting off the bed, and Cam felt a loss at her warmth. See you later, Cam, Scarlett said. Sounds like it's this guy's bedtime. Kyle grinned lecherously, and Cam was just embarrassed for him. Oh yeah, it's definitely past bedtime. Once Scarlett was out of the room with Kyle and the door was firmly shut behind them, Cam let out a massive groan and flopped over on her bed. She could start a new movie or just stare sullenly at her ceiling, which seemed more likely. Before we start chapter 2, I'm just going to take a brief note to mention that this was written in, I think, 2021, possibly 2022, which is just last year. But it was before the writer's strike, and I will possibly be reconsidering the mention of a specific actress who does not support writers. Although I will say that Music and Lyrics is a really good movie. Ah! That's it for today, kids. We broke it. Chapter 2. Cameron's door creaked open and her head popped out, ready to pop back in at a moment's notice. The door across the hall was still closed, and there didn't seem to be anyone in the living room or kitchen. Hopefully, she could just sneak out and then get back into her room before anyone else made an appearance. She'd forgotten to schedule the pickup for groceries, and she was pretty sure nothing had materialized in the fridge, but she was willing to try. She padded down the hallway, trying her best to be as quiet as possible. Yes, she hissed to herself as she reached to the top of the fridge, arms stretched and on tiptoes. Scarlett had performed a miracle and remembered to replace the cereal that Kyle had stolen. Mini marshmallows would certainly brighten up Cam's Saturday immensely. She poured herself a bowl with milk, as Scarlett had remembered to replace that too. Cam sighed happily as she took her first bite. Her joy was interrupted by the sound of Scarlett's door opening and closing. Cam was prepared to run at the first sight of Kyle, but was pleasantly surprised to see Scarlett. God damn, she was a sight in the morning. Her hair was still sleep mussed, the curls falling softly down her back, and she had an oversized blouse that looked loose and cool. The jeans she was wearing were light in color but had a stripe of darker denim running down the side, which looked really neat and highlighted the plush curve of her hips. New jeans? Cam asked, glancing up to meet Scarlett's eye. There was something there, like Scarlett had noticed Cam noticing, and enjoyed the slow appraisal. Cam started to blush. She felt caught, and maybe she was. She quickly crunched another spoonful of cereal. Old jeans, actually. I added the strip in, Scarlett said as it was her turn to flush. She tucked a curl behind her ear. I've gained a little, quarantine weight, and I couldn't get them on without some additional panels. You look amazing. You did a great job, Cam said, praying there were no rainbow-colored marshmallows sticking to her teeth. As usual, she was so focused on Scarlett that she hadn't heard the door to Scarlett's room open again, but there was Kyle coming into the kitchen. He looked less amazing. He hadn't bothered to get dressed, and he was shirtless and in just his boxers. His hair was sticking up at all angles. Let me get a bowl of that, he grunted, snatching the box of cereal from the counter. In a total dude bro move, he tipped his head back and poured the cereal directly into his open mouth. Kyle, that's not ours, Scarlett told him. I literally watched you buy it, Kyle said with flecks of hearts and horseshoes spraying out when he talked. Yeah, to replace what you ate. You can't just take Cam's stuff, Scarlett pointed out, her eyebrows raised and her eyes wide. Her voice had all the qualities of a kindergarten teacher scolding a misbehaving child. As she spoke, Kyle sat the box back on the counter and gave Cam a doubting look, as if they were conspirators, and it took everything Cam had not to kick him out. You sure about that? Are you sure maybe you didn't eat it? Kyle reached out and patted Scarlett on her hip. You're the one that had to make yourself fat pants. Jesus fucking Christ, Kyle. Scarlett must have seen the murderous look on Cameron's face because she started waving over Kyle's shoulder like she didn't want Cam to start a fight. Kyle, completely clueless, had already moved on to look inside their empty refrigerator. Get a move on, babe. I'm gonna need breakfast before we take our walk. Probably something light for you, don't you think? Kyle said. He closed the fridge with a pointed look at Scarlett. That was a typo. I'm gonna just note that. At Scarlett. And then went back to the bedroom, presumably to get dressed, one would hope. Sure, yeah, whatever you want, babe. Be right there, Scarlett said weakly. Cam had choices to make. She could outright complain about the guy, or she could just shut up and let Scarlett do her own thing. But she didn't understand what was so special about Kyle, body shamer supreme, and king of the douche canoes. Scarlett shouldn't have to put up with shit like this. I know, Scarlett said with a heavy sigh, probably answering the look on Cam's expressive face. A poker player Cam was not. I don't know what to do with him. He can be really awful sometimes, I guess. He is pretty gross, Cam allowed herself to agree. She stirred her cereal, her appetite lost. But he can be really sweet. Or He used to be kind of sweet. I think the pandemic has really gotten to all of us, Scarlett whispered. And that was the thing Cam loved about Scarlett, that she was always so willing to forgive or try to see the bright side. Oh shit. Love. Cam gulped and promised to review that emotion at a later date. I think the panini has definitely given me some time to think about how I wanted to be treated by others. Life is too short to put up with a person that makes fun of you or your art. Or Scarlett's perfect ass, but that seemed like it was better left unsaid, even if it was true. Yeah, Scarlett replied slowly. Definitely something to think about. For sure. Cam tried to give Scarlett a smile, but it was slow and probably just as pained as it felt. She noticed Scarlett staring at her lip. What? You've got a little something, Scarlett said, and she reached out with one of her soft, clever fingers that Cam always admired, but she hesitated, hovering just over Cam's lip. This okay? In a world where people tried to forget a pandemic, it was absolutely delightful to be asked for consent to touch. Absolutely. And the soft pad of Scarlett's finger wiped whatever it was away from Cameron's mouth, lingering at the corner like she was going to continue up and brush Cameron's cheek. They lingered for a moment, the air heavy between them, and Scarlett's lips parted. Babe! Coming! Sorry, Cam. See you later. Good talk, Cam muttered to herself. She dumped out her cereal and went back to her room. Suddenly, she just wasn't in the mood for luck or charms. It took a while, but eventually Cam talked herself into leaving the apartment. The stifling feeling that had lingered too long, so she donned her mask and headed out to the nearest coffee shop, Devil's Stomping Grounds. Her thighs chafed as she walked, with her ragged cutoffs both riding up and getting a bit damp as she sweated in the summer sun, but it felt like a penance. Thou shalt not covet thy straight roommate or some shit. Eve had started Devil's Grounds a long time ago, maybe even decades, and she left the day-to-day operations to Kita and a handful of part-timers. It was a bastion of safety, really, where the local gays gathered. It was situated on Main Street, but it was angled into a courtyard that it shared with Vain Attraction Salon and Gallery QC. Though through the pandemic, they put a whole bunch of rickety tables outside so people could still congregate even if they probably shouldn't. It was too hot, but everyone had been cooped up in their homes for so long they were willing to risk heat stroke if it meant going outside. Cam, haven't seen you in a while, Kita called happily. Her eyes crinkled up, showing she was smiling even though her face was covered. Her long braids were swept up today and tied in a scarf that had a very familiar floral print to it. She was seated outside at one of the tables with a book in her hands. How she could stand to be outside in the sun reading on a day like this was inconceivable. Hey, I love your scarf. Did Scarlett make you that? Cam asked. Ooh, there's another typo. Yeah, she did. Made the mask, too, Kita replied. Her eyes crinkled with that smile again. I thought the fabric looked familiar, Cam said. She gestured to the inside. You're not working? On a Saturday morning? Kita rolled her eyes. Eve has me on the closing shift tonight, so I'm just hanging out. Jesse should be stopping by soon. Awesome. Let me grab a drink and I'll come back if that's okay, Cam said. She went to stand in line while Eve, who was training the new girl, made her a large iced vanilla latte. She took a croissant as well, just in case her appetite ever returned. Just a few weeks earlier, the card reader had been put on a long stick that Kita or Eve would hold out to prevent any contact, but those days were fading as the usual tablet setup returned. Cam's heart flipped a little, wondering if maybe everything was moving a little bit too fast. It occurred to her that Kyle wasn't the only threat to her warm bubble of Scarlett. They'd be back in the office soon. Was it screwed up that she was enjoying this time a little, even if it meant horrible things for other people? Are you okay? Kita asked as watching Cam slump into the seat across from her. The sun was beating down on Cam's neck, making her sweat under her mask. Spare me from a minor in psych, Cam teased. She sighed, unable to help herself. Do you ever think we're going too fast? I don't know. It just feels like everything is changing. Of course it is, Kita said. Speaking of change, just a heads up that Jesse is going by he, him pronouns now. Cam's eyes widened and she chewed her straw. Really? I'll keep that in mind. How do you feel about that? Everyone knew Kita's nesting partner, Jessie, with an IE, now Jessie with just an E. Jessie lurked around Devil's grounds most nights that Kita was working and would talk to anyone that would stand still long enough about his love of theater. That was the thing. Jessie was an actor and did a lot of local community productions, but often complained about how hard it was to be a queer person in the theater scene. Coming out as trans was a big decision in such a small community. Kita paused for a second with a pensive expression on her face. It caused her brows to knit and the skin around her eyes to crease. Well, that's the thing about change. Maybe Jessie's pronouns are different, but that's still my Jessie. Jessie isn't any different. Cam nodded. Good point. Kita winked. I'm always right. Cam! Oh, shit. Kyle and Scarlett were headed their way, with Scarlett practically dragging Kyle along. They were unmasked, which was technically allowed outside, but it felt like seeing them naked. Cam was almost sure, but not quite, that she heard him mutter a complaint about this specific coffee shop under his breath. A glance at Kita's face told her that Kita heard it too, because the angry flash in her brown eyes and the furrow of her brows was an angry mirror of Cam's own expression. It was one thing to be a dick bean in private, but to act like a complete cock here at Devil's was completely unforgivable. Hey, Kita, where's Jessie? Scarlett asked. Kyle slid his hand into Scarlett's back pocket, using her jeans to pull her close to him. Cam wanted to choke, or choke him, either one. He's getting his hair cut, Kita said. She motioned across the little courtyard to Vain Attraction, a queer-friendly salon run by a really hot but really intimidating bisexual. Scarlett's eyes brightened. He? Well, that's exciting. Oh, cool. Does that mean I can try making boy clothes? He would love that, Kita told her, and she squealed with delight. Kyle whined. Babe, why don't you ever try to make me boy clothes? He said in a sing-songy voice. I thought you didn't want any when I used... So sorry for that. I thought you said you didn't want any when I asked you, Scarlett asked, confused. Kyle stuttered, but then flashed Kita and Cam what he thought was an obviously charming smile. I'd love it if you made me something. Jessie was coming out of the salon just then, waving goodbye to the owner, Samantha Vain, as he stepped down into the courtyard. Before, when he'd been auditioning for female roles, he'd let his hair get super long. Now Vain had buzzed off all the dark curls on the side, leaving a little poof on top that was still damp and tousled from being styled. He was wearing a bright pink button-up and a pair of well-fitting jeans, and he looked confident. More so than the last time Cam had seen him. She whistled. Kyle choked on a laugh. It was a really small laugh, but it was still a laugh, and Jesse's happiness faded slightly, his face turning sour. Got something to say, man? Nah, bro, not at all, Kyle replied. But his returning smile wasn't nice. It was mean. Cam glanced at Scarlett, and she was looking a little green around the edges. Looking good, Jessie. Hey, we gotta head back to the apartment. Scarlett has that big order to finish for the gallery, Cam said hurriedly. She stood and then gave into the impulse to reach over and squeeze Jessie's hand. You look fucking amazing. You look gorgeous, babe, Kita said. Jessie quirked a brow at Kyle, who just snorted and tried to hide a giggle. See you guys later, Scarlett said. Her face was murderous, and she started to pull Kyle away. Cam just offered Kita a shrug. I fucking hate him. I don't know why you would, Jessie muttered. Seems like a real winner. If that's true, I've never been so glad to have bad taste in my life, Cam replied. She tipped her drink at the two of them. See ya. Okay, bookmark. Okay. That got a little silly. I'm sorry. My other ones I just read straight through almost without any commentary. And this one I actually found 2 typos. So that got a little silly. I'm sorry. The problem is the way that I edit. The typos, if they are just words, if they're not like an actual typo, I will miss them. Like, because I have a program that'll just read it out loud to me, and then I can find all the misspelled words. But if Jessie is spelled incorrectly, it doesn't tell you because it's still Jessie. It's still the name Jessie. So there were a couple times I found some words that weren't supposed to be where they were. Anyway, thank you for listening. That's chapters 1 and 2 of Seems a Bit Queer. And I guess I will go eat some lunch, and I will come back and I will see you for chapters 3 and 4 soon. Until then, please make sure that you are taking care of yourself. Go outside, get a walk, get some snacks, get some water, take your meds. Don't let people like Kyle push you around. And I'll see you next time. Bye.